Excellent. So again, we are so excited to hear from the Texas Grants Resource Center, and I'm going to turn it over to Ashlyn.
Great. Thank you so much, Chelsea. Hello, everyone. My name is Ashlyn Gray. I'm a graduate assistant at the Texas Grants Resource Center, and I'm really pleased to get to present with you today. Mission Capital is one of our partners, and we're so thankful for that partnership. So great to see all of you. We'll jump right in. So this is the introduction to finding grants. And our goal in this training is that you'll be able to list the different types of foundations, explain funder motivation for giving grants, prove your organization's credibility, and be able to research potential funders on your own. So a little bit more about us and who we are. The Texas Grants Resource Center is a program of the Division of Diversity and Community Engagement, which has the Center for Community Engagement at UT Austin. So that's our connection to the university. And then we also are part of the Funding Information Network of Candid. Candid was formerly the Foundation Center. And so we're connected to other funding professionals and nonprofits in this space through Candid's Funding Information Network. And a quick note is that I'll be sending out these presentation slides through Chelsea after this presentation. So feel free to take notes, but you don't have to if you don't want to. So our Funding Information Network connection is really, nationwide and global. So there are over 400 different Funding Information Network locations in the US, 21 locations in Texas. So if you're not centered in Central Texas, or folks who want grant support in other parts of Texas or other parts of the United States, our network partners have deep knowledge about their region. So that's a great place to get connected if you're looking at a different region other than Central Texas. So a little background about Candid. Candid is a nonprofit organization that connects people who want to change the world with the resources that they need to do it. In 2019, Foundation Center partnered with GuideStar to become Candid. So they merged together, and these organizations bring a combined 88 years of expertise and lots of data to Candid itself. So Candid has 3 arms of their organization. So they conduct research, support collaboration, and develop training for nonprofit professionals. And so Foundation Directory Online is the grant search database that we primarily use at the Texas Grants Resource Center, and is a really great resource to find grant opportunities. And that's what we'll be focusing on today. Candid also has a GuideStar application where you can create a profile for your nonprofit, gain some credibility, network with other nonprofits. And then the last arm of Candid is the Candid Learning site, which is a great repository of all kinds of trainings, documents, and information about how to write a grant application, what a letter of intent looks like, all those kinds of things. And so we'll also be providing information about that. So jumping into the introduction to finding grants, we want to start with the 10 most important things that we think you need to know about finding grants. The first is that you can't survive on grants alone. So when thinking about your development strategy, it's important to think about all the different ways that you can be raising funds for your organization. And while grants are essential, they're not the only piece. So looking at data from 2019, this is pre-pandemic, so we know the world has changed a little bit, but I think this is still relevant to building out your funding stream. You can see here that 68% of private contributions were actually from individual giving. And this is reported by nonprofit organizations. 18% was from foundation grants, which is what we're talking about today. 9% were from bequests, and 5% were from corporation giving programs. So as you can see, foundation grants make up a large chunk of these contributions, but we'd be remiss without looking at individual giving, bequests, and corporate giving programs. So just as you're building out your strategy for development, it's important to think about how to really utilize all of these different kinds of funding. Second is that not all foundations are alike. So thinking about private foundations, there's three main types. And the first is independent private foundations, sometimes called family foundations. These foundations derive their funds from an individual, a group of individuals, or a family. Some of the more well-known independent private foundations are like MacArthur, Gates, those types of big name private foundations, but the majority of these foundations are actually small family foundations. And so the small family foundations are often have limited staff, and these might be foundations that take applications by invitation only. And so if you're thinking about more independent private foundations with small family foundation backgrounds, it can be helpful to build a relationship with them first so that you can be invited to apply. And so that's that type of foundation. The second is company sponsored. Company sponsored foundations are connected to a for-profit company, but they are separate in that they have their own independent board of directors and endowment. So because of that, they have some independence in deciding who gets funding, what they want to fund, and the way they go about it. But they may still be connected to the corporation's values and interests. So examples of this would be the Coca-Cola Foundation or Domino's Foundation. So they have a loose tie to the for-profit entity, but are independent. And then finally, the operating foundation is a foundation that exists to fund its own organization's missions and goals. So for example, the Getty Trust funds the Getty Museum and all of their operating and programming. So these operating foundations are not typically ones that you would be applying for grants from, since they are focused mainly on their own organization. Then looking at other types of grant makers, we have direct corporate giving programs. So it's important to note that these are different than the previous company-sponsored private foundation. So with the direct corporate giving program, it is part of the corporation. It is completely tied to the for-profit business. And so if you're applying to this type of program, they're more interested in understanding how their brand and their corporate social responsibility can be furthered in the community. So thinking about their community image, their community engagement as a company, and looking at how they can partner with community organizations to further that brand image and responsibility. Second are grant-making public charities. So these organizations are very specifically focused on population groups, a specific issue area, and so this could, or a specific location. So whereas the independent family foundations might be interested in a broad variety of issues, grant-making public charities are typically interested in one specific issue area, like the Global Fund for Women or something like that. And finally, the government entities. There are government grants at the local, state, and federal levels. Applying for government grants and then reporting on government grants are a little bit different than private foundation grants. So we like to host an introduction to government grants as well, to give more context into that specific application. So more to come on that. Okay. Our third point is that foundations must give money away. So this seems obvious, but it's helpful when you're applying for a grant to bring this mindset, because it can be intimidating to ask for money. And it's helpful to realize that in applying for this grant, you are actually helping the foundation further their mission. This is what they were set up to do and what they want to do. So looking at it that way can help with some of the confidence piece of telling your narrative and asking for funds. And as you've seen through our presentation, funder motivation is everything. Every foundation has its own motivation of why they want to be giving funds, who they want to be giving to, and what purposes they want to advance. So it's really important in your research to try to get at the heart of those motivations for each foundation. But the different scaffolding we've already set up, each organization, each type of foundation kind of has its own motivations to begin with. So looking at private foundations, they're usually wanting to fill a variety of philanthropic goals through many different issue areas and working with lots of different kinds of different populations. So they, even though maybe they have funded an education related project in the past, they might also be interested in working with United Way or a different organization that's not only education focused. So you, in looking at what they've done in the past, you can think about, some more variety in the future too. Corporations, as we stated before, tend to focus more on their branding, visibility, and corporate social responsibility. And grant-making public charities are usually focused on a designated community or region, or a specific population group or issue area. So as you can see, all of these foundations would be great places to apply, but they each have their own interests. So it's helpful to really hone in on who's wanting to fund what and make sure you're really matching up your organization to the best fit for you too. Because grant applications are tedious and can take a lot of time. So we want to make sure that you are putting your time and effort into the best fit. Okay, our fourth point is that grant writing is never about the need of your organization. And this seems confusing on first glance, but I think the point of this is that you don't want to send a foundation a laundry list of needs. The goal is to really craft a narrative about your organization and tell a story about who you are, the work that you're doing, why it matters, how it's impacting the community. So really showing them who you are and what you do instead of just what you need. And so I think once you're telling that narrative and showing them who you are and what you do, that's going to make your request then more compelling because you've already set the stage for how you're going to actually make it happen in the community. Moving into this idea of credibility, it's important to really, as you're crafting your narrative about who you are, show that you're going to be able to follow through if given the grant. So looking at, your legal nonprofit status, showing that you have a compelling mission that's compatible with their focus area, showcasing your strong leadership structure, that you have high quality programs that meet a real need in the community, that you're data driven, and that you have a strong organizational and financial infrastructure. So looking at all of these things, it's helpful to weave these into your narrative so that you can show them that you're going to be able to really implement these funds in a way that's meaningful for the community. For the first aspect, if you're not a legal nonprofit, you can engage in fiscal sponsorship, which is partnering with a nonprofit that does have 501c3 status and then applying for grants in that way. So that's a specific process that has some more detailed information on the Candid Learning website. Great, and moving on to the next slide. So as you can see, funder motivations are different for every foundation. There's lots of different aspects to the application process. And so doing your homework first is essential because, once you've done that work on the front end of finding the foundations that are a great fit for you and that you're a great fit for them, that will make your application process easier. And also, I want to clarify that when you're crafting your narrative about who you are, you're not changing it for anyone, but you can tailor it. So the difference is you're being authentic and sharing who you are as an organization, but you are pulling out those things that might be even more appealing to one foundation versus another and really highlighting that. So showing them that you're a great fit and it's a no-brainer that they'll want to partner with you. And clearly the one-size-fits-all approach doesn't work just because every foundation is different in what they're looking for. Some foundations want you to give a phone call on the first approach. Others want the full grant application. Some want a summarized letter of intent. Everybody has a different approach. And so it's important to really do your homework first, see what they're looking for, and then build your strategy that way. And to get the grant, you have to find the right match. So some guiding questions in your search, since it can be overwhelming, a place to start is who funds in my area of interest and the population that I serve. Who are the big players? Who's giving a lot of money? Who is, a continued partner in this work? Also, who funds in your geographic region? And who will provide the support that you need. So this last piece is looking towards types of funding. So if you're looking for program support, certain foundations are really excited about giving that money. Others might be interested in capital campaigns or funding, seed money requests. Some are interested in professional development funding. So thinking about what types of funding you need and how one foundation might not be interested in funding all of those things. You might have to kind of look to different organizations for those funding needs. And another aspect of this homework and research is asking for the right amount of grant funding. So one way to do this is when you do your grant search on Foundation Directory online, they have a section on the profiles that shows the most common grant amount awarded, and then a list of the past couple of years of folks who have gotten grants from them. And so it'll list the organization, how much they were given, what it went towards, what program it funded, and then what year it was given. So you can see, in 2010 to 2015, this organization was giving, $5,000 grants. But then in 2015 to 2020, they're starting to give $20,000 grants. So now they've changed their approach, and $20,000 might be, an appropriate ask now that they've shifted their funding mechanism. So that's a helpful data point to have in your corner to better understand the right amount to ask for. And the reason you want to do this is so that when they pick up your application, it is really easy for them to say yes. They don't have to go back and forth about stipulations, but can just say, yeah, this seems like a great fit. We can do that. And then you don't need to know someone to get a grant, but it can definitely help you get your foot in the door. And ways to find a connection would be through your board members or donors, any organizational partners you have, community partners, your current funding network, and then anyone on your LinkedIn network too. These can be great places to just find a connection to the foundation to learn more, maybe set up an informational interview, just learn about the organization and the foundation and what they're looking for, especially if you couldn't find enough information on their website or their Foundation Directory online profile. But like we said, it's definitely not essential to know someone to get a grant. It can just help you fill in some gaps and build that personal relationship with them. One thing to note is if you do build a connection with a foundation through your board member or donor, we recommend that you really take personal ownership of that relationship after being connected, so that in the future, if that board member changes or you don't have that donor anymore, you don't also lose the relationship with the foundation. So just taking a really proactive approach with those relationships. And finally, our 10th point is that the proposal is typically not the first thing a foundation wants. Sometimes they are interested in a phone call. I mentioned a letter of intent, which is really a summarized proposal that just goes over the main points so that they can get a sense of who you are. Some foundations are now doing online applications that are just brief to better understand who you are, and they'll kind of weed through those. And then if they follow up with you, you submit the full report. So each foundation kind of has a different approach, but that will be listed on the profile or on their website. If it's acceptable, we do recommend trying to make a phone call just to have that more personal approach. And if you do have a phone call, it's great to know who you're talking to and why. Not just anyone at the organization, but really trying to find that person who could be best suited to your phone call. keeping the conversation brief and to the point, and trying to make sure you learn about what they're asking for the application. And it's helpful to have most of your application drafted, or at least like know what you're going to talk about, so that if they have the phone call with you and say, you know, your organization's a great fit, we want you to apply next week or something, you're not scrambling to get it all in order. And then finally, try to utilize contacts if you have them. That's a great way to get your foot in the door. And like I said, we'll be sending these slides out later, but here are some helpful links to get started in your grant search. You know, information on Candid, grant space, different trainings from Candid, finding foundation information network locations, folks who are working in your specific region. This second half of the slide talks about our offerings as the Texas Grants Resource Center. So we do offer Foundation Directory Online Essential Access through the Candid Day Pass. So if you're not familiar, Candid has opened up their Foundation Directory Online for virtual access during the pandemic. And the way it works is you sign up for an account. They, once you've registered, they grant you access to the database for a 24-hour period once a month. So we know that it can be hard to get all your grant searches in one 24-hour period. So we also provide the Grant Search Concierge Service through the Texas Grants Resource Center. And this is a way for us to help out and do some grant searches while you're waiting to also access your day pass through Candid. And then finally, the Austin Public Library branches have in-person access to the Foundation Directory Online. So if you are comfortable going in person, that's a great resource because you can go as much as you want and get in all your grant searches that way. So a final update is that the TGRC has moved into the Chase building in East Austin off of Navasota Street. And so we will be opening in the spring for in-person Foundation Directory Online access. So we're very excited about that, and we'll have more updates to share. But that is my last slide. We also will be sending out a tutorial of going through the Foundation Directory Online and how to actually craft your search. And that video will be shared later. So I'll turn it back over to Chelsea, and we can start our Q&A session.
Yeah, and just want to share, if you have questions about this process, what this looks like, what kind of support to get from TGRC, this is a great time to ask it. You're welcome to come off mute and ask your questions to the group. You're welcome to chat them, or if you don't feel comfortable sharing with the group, you can also chat me or Ashlyn directly, and we're happy to answer as well.
And I'm happy to answer questions about the grant search process, about how to develop your search terms. I'm also happy to talk about our offerings at the Texas Grants Resource Center in more depth.
Yeah, Ashlyn, there's a great question in the chat. Do they have to be on the network to do the search, or do they have to use one of the library computers? What does the process look like?
Yeah, thank you for your question. That's a great one. So from my understanding, I think that you can be connected to the network or on one of the computers. I would check before, I'm like 99% sure of that. But I think if you are on their public library network, that you can also access the Foundation Directory online. And here, I will share, let's see. We do have a couple sites here that are step-by-step of how to connect. So if you go to research and databases under the virtual library, it shows all these different opportunities, and you find Foundation Directory Online Professional, Access Now, oh, and then it'll send you to the website. So from my understanding, if you're on their network, you'll be able to connect. But this is a good step-by-step approach.
Can you kind of walk us through, if you're starting really generally looking for grants or foundations, you mentioned specific keywords. Can you talk to us a little bit about how to stumble upon those really? I'm sure it's part art and science.
Definitely. So keywords and searching for grants. Okay. So my recommendation would be to go into the Foundation Directory online and just kind of play around with their search terms. So the way that it's set up is there's like a general search bar, but then there's all these different like search filters. And basically you'll go in there and see like, issue area, and then it'll say arts and culture, and then you click that and there's a further drop down that has all of these different keywords. And I think part of the journey is learning how Foundation Directory Online classifies things. So kind of learning the way that they talk about the work that you're doing. And so I think just going in and looking through all the different filters and finding, okay, this seems to fit and this seems to fit, let me put those together and see what happens. And then looking to see, are these the foundations that I'm interested in? Not really. Let's go back and like tweak it. I put education, but they're looking at more elementary education and I'm thinking of graduate education. So I need to change the way that I'm doing it. So I think it is part of the process of just kind of like tweaking the search menus and stuff like that. But that's described in the video too. So hopefully that will be helpful.
Hi, Ashley. I have a question. Great job on the presentation, by the way. Shout out to Chelsea. We've been best friends since last December. I'm just saying I'm biased. Chelsea's the greatest human being at Mission Capital. If you don't like it, sue me. You won't sue me for much, by the way. Ashley, you said something earlier about strong financials and strong organizational structure. What would you say, or I don't know, maybe recommend for the grassroots nonprofits who have been around for several years, but don't have years of leveraging grants and been self-funded and donations and stuff like that? So how do you present yourself strong financial structure, but you don't have a history of $50,000, $75,000, $100,000 grants, but you want it? And you know the impact of what that would do for the program. How do you convey that message? Shout out to Chelsea again, in case you missed it. She's the greatest thing at Mission Capital, but whatever. I'm biased completely.
Thank you, Robert, for your question and for the shout out for Chelsea. I think that's a great point. And I think that points to problems within the foundation and nonprofit field, is that a lot of organizations that have been around for a while and have been getting money tend to seem more credible and keep getting funds, while these grassroots organizations need the funding too, and are just as able and to utilize those funds and make an impact in the community. So I think your point is well taken, and I would say it's all about crafting your narrative to show the impact you're making in the community and what systems you have set up. Sorry, things are beeping around me. I hope you can still hear. What you have set up to really make the impact in your community. So I guess what I'm trying to say is showcasing the organization you have, how you evaluate your programs, the budgeting structure you do, like all of these things that will support you in being able to actually leverage the grant funds, and showing that you have that structure in place, I think will be helpful. And also showing that you meet a specific need in the community that maybe other organizations aren't meeting. I think that uniqueness piece also helps them see that the work you're doing is making a true impact and it's not being replicated. It's necessary work. I don't know if that helps. I can definitely look into more information on that, but I think that this is definitely a space that we need to keep pushing in, and that showing that structure is just as important as showing what you've gotten in the past.
Yeah, and I'm adding just a couple of resources to the chat too, about community-centric fundraising has really done a lot to kind of discuss how do we kind of shift this power imbalance and make sure that we're changing the positioning and the framework of what it was. I think Ashlyn, one of your points was great of like their job exists to give money, like they need to give this money away. So you really are there's more power really in what you're doing than it might feel like, certainly many times. So I'm just going to add a couple of links that they have suggestions for as well. And there's a monthly Texas meeting that might be helpful for some of crafting of that narrative as well. And Ashlyn, we have some questions in the chat. You mentioned a site for researching what amount foundations commonly grant or to whom they're generally granting. Is there a specific website or is that just research you do on the individual website? What does that look like?
Yes, thank you for that question. So it's through the Foundation Directory Online, which is the database that Candid has to look at funders. So on the video that will be sent out, it shows you what a profile looks like. And on that profile is all the information about grants they've given in the past. So typically I would go through that live. We are having a glitch with our system, so I apologize for that. I think it will be much more clear when you watch the video tutorial. But if you have questions, please feel free to email me because I'd love to hop on a call and talk through it with you if you have any questions about that. But it is the Foundation Directory Online.
And how often do you find that new grant opportunities are added to the directory? Is there a notification feature? How can you tell when new grants are come in? What does that look like?
That's a great question. I actually don't know the answer. I think that foundations are asked to update their information yearly about who they are, but I'm not sure how often they update their specific grant opportunities. So usually the way that the search comes out in Foundation Directory Online is you get a list of grant makers. So not necessarily grants to apply for, but grant makers that could be a good fit for you. And then it will list out, you know, they accept grants on a rolling basis or they accept grants quarterly or something like that. And then you'll dig in deeper. So it's mainly to help you find who are the funders that are going to be really good partners for me. And I think that information is updated at least yearly. And then as far as notification feature, I have not found one yet, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So sorry, I don't have a more concrete answer for you, but I'm not quite sure.
Can you talk a little bit more about the support? Like how many questions is it comfortable for us to ask for you? If there's lots of questions, what's that concierge or that support service look like?
Yeah, totally. So the Grant Search Concierge Service is something we developed during the pandemic to try to better support folks' needs virtually. So it is our workaround, but we have developed a Google form where you can type in your search terms. We do have a list of them, so you can kind of decide, you know, I think this one and that fit for me. And then also a spot to talk about who you are as an organization, what kinds of funds you're looking for, what programs you want to fund, that sort of thing. It just gives us enough context to then actually run a search for you on our end. So our goal was to do this on kind of a temporary basis where it would be, you know, for one-off searches and stuff like that. And so we typically send you a list of organizations that could be good fits for you, and then 10 profiles of like the top 10 most compatible foundations. So you can really start digging into their information. We are working to develop an option where if you have follow-up questions, there's a separate channel for that, so you don't get sent back into the huge pool of folks. So that will be rolled out shortly, but that is our approach right now. And to be transparent, we have a pretty big backlog currently of requests. So my first recommendation would be to go through the Austin Public Libraries and then also accessing the day pass virtually. And then finally requesting the search through the Concierge Service. And there are never too many questions. So Chelsea, if you have more, please feel free to shoot them my way.
Yeah, I feel like we've both had the experience of like what we can do in the pandemic got reimagined all of a sudden. So, but it doesn't mean that we all of a sudden have more manpower. So it's a good learning curve and balance.
Definitely. And I think to that point, we are excited to keep imagining how we can serve our partners through in-person and virtual options, because I think this has shown us that there's so many ways to connect with folks. And so we're really thinking about how to do a hybrid approach in the future. And we'll be working closely with Candid to learn how we can do that.
Awesome. Is the 24-hour access by individual or by organization?
Great question. It's by individual, as long as you have a different email address than other folks in your organization. So that's my understanding, because you create a profile based on your name and email address, and then you access the foundation directory online day pass through that profile. But say your other coworkers are also wanting to do grant searches, as long as they set it up with their specific email address, you're good to go and should all be able to access it at different times. So that's a great point. You could coordinate with your coworkers and say, I'm going to take Monday, you take next week, and you take the following week. That way you'll have longer access. Yeah.
All right, we certainly have time for one more question if anybody has anything. I do want to reiterate, we're going to be sending the recording, the slides, a recording of how to navigate the website itself. And then we will share the resources we shared today and that were shared in the slide deck as well. So you'll have access to everything post this event as well. But yeah, any other questions before we wrap it up today? Well, then I just want to thank you very much for joining us today, and for all of you for bringing the great questions that you did. I know this is such a, this is one of the questions that's going to plague us all as nonprofits, and it's so great to be able to have everybody's perspective in the room and to be able to just have some time to sit with, hear some of the process. We will certainly be following up, and if you have questions, I'll be copying Ashlyn on our email out, so feel free to respond to either of us, and we will be here to help. We'll definitely continue this conversation in the future. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Today, and we look forward to seeing you at the next one.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.